The evolution of flip effect monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is interesting. Initially, they were monsters with standard effects that may have been too strong for the early game, so they had the restriction where you had to set them face down on the field and wait a turn before using the effect, which triggers by flipping them face up. Then they started getting power crept by similar or stronger effects that activated without needing to be set. Konami also escalated flip effect monsters' obsolescence by making monsters with effects that activated when they were flipped face up, which were different than official flip effect monsters, so they weren't restricted to cards that stopped flip effects. It's a very specific distinction. And now if we see the elusive official flip effect, they try to be very strong and on archetypes that cater to flip effects. So with this tragic backstory of flip effect monsters, we wanted to find the weirdest of them that the game has offered. By weird, we mean these flip effects were either simply out of the ordinary or just laughably weak. We'll also take other factors into consideration, like restrictions or card wording, anime appearances, or even how they look. Also, we'll just be covering cards that specifically say flip in caps lock on them. None of those wannabe when flipped face up imposters without the caps lock. And joining me is my cavalcade of co-hosts. Judgment Meter?
I don't know what flip effects are.
Yes, you do. Go back and listen to the intro I just recorded.
I guess I am.
Corgian from the Corgian Twitch channel.
There's no such thing as a flip toon monster.
Sam from the Dungeon Dive Bar podcast.
That's right, Corgian. Even tunes aren't bad enough to get a flip effect.
Professor Oats.
The Quaker Oats guy walked so that I could run.
And professional skill drain fan, SyzygySolo.
Face down, flip up. That's the way I like to activate effects.
Now, let's set the top 10 weirdest Yu-Gi-Oh! Flip monsters. Number 10, Weather Report. When flipped, this monster destroys all your opponent's Swords of Revealing Light, which was one of the strongest spells back in the day, preventing the opposing monsters from attacking for 3 turns when Swords was face up. Since the Swords card has to remain on the field for those 3 turns, now it's never used, since it's too slow for today's game and very easy to remove or negate, so this card having a flip effect that solely goes after an obsolete card seems both useless and needlessly specific. However, when Weather Report was released, back row removal was not as common. It came out in only the 3rd TCG set when we had a limited card pool. You had D-Spell, Magic Jammer, Heavy Storm at Super Rare, and a few others, so having a card that counters one of the top back row of 2002 is not the most far-fetched idea in theory. That being said, Weather Report never saw usage since the generic spell and trap removal was just better and less restrictive, but it's still not completely random why they would choose to have a specific Swords of Revealing Light removal card.
He also didn't predict that his effect would have long-reaching consequences on the rest of the game. Him and an Unfortunate Report are the only 2 cards that allow for multiple battle phases in a turn. So now every single card that references the battle phase says each of your battle phases. So this card can attack twice during each of your battle phases. This card gains 500 attack only during each of your battle phases. So because of 2 cards that will probably never ever see any play whatsoever, every single card has to adjust itself ever so slightly.
The man with a cloud and cool sandals who single-handedly ruined Yu-Gi-Oh!
Man yells at Cloud for ruining Yu-Gi-Oh!
I want to talk about something with Weather Report. The man's got good sandals on.
I'm telling you, those sandals go crazy.
I do also want to share as the last bit about this guy. This man is made of Konami orbs. He's just 2 orbs. I know he's supposed to be a snowman to represent cold weather, but no, he is orbulent. He's walking towards the sun. He's leaving. You know, like in the end of like the 70s Incredible Hulk where Lou Ferrigno was just walking into the sunset? It's like that. This is the face of a man who knows what he's done and is okay with it. He's not pleased. He's not upset. He's just accepted his lot in life.
And what's with that little guy that's hanging above his head? It's like he needs something that motivates him to walk like a doggy with a treat.
It's called a Teratera Bozu. It's a little Japanese good luck charm for good weather. The little ghosty boys.
Oh.
He has a Pokemon.
Yeah.
What was more weird to me about this card than its effect was that they specifically chose this monster design to be the Swords of Revealing Light killer. I would have expected it to be be like a shadow monster or something that would be the enemy of the revealing light. Instead, they chose a Teru Teru Bozu weather balloon guy who's the counterpart of a different weather guy who doesn't have an effect. I would have just expected this guy to counter some weather-based card, like Convulsion of Nature. He hates that deck being flipped upside down. How's he stopping those swords of revealing light with his design? I like to imagine that it's just raining swords all around him and he can put up his mini umbrella, though that umbrella looks pretty weak and the swords would just pierce on through it. Then again, I'm not the weather sword expert like him. Number 9, D-Boys. When flipped, you can summon as many D-Boys from your deck in attack position. Okay, so like a giant germ or bubonic vermin or assault dog effect, just with a bad battle position attack point combo. Wait, what's this extra part? I take 1,000 points of damage for each D-Boys I summon with this effect. Wow, that's terrible!
This is used in my reverse bad reaction to Samochi deck.
Good reaction to Samachi.
Reversal Quiz Turbo.
Yeah, it's a Reversal Quiz Turbo card.
Don't get me wrong, using your life points as a resource to summon monsters is great. I'll use UA Signing Deal anytime. I'll even use some life points to summon a few mystical shine balls. But this feels like a drawback from early Yu-Gi-Oh! When card advantage was harder to get back then. You're taking up to 2,000 points of damage for a couple of monsters with 100 attack points, and they have to be summoned in attack mode, so they're sitting ducks if your opponent has a second monster after attacking into your first flipped up D-Boys.
I would really hate if hanging out with the boys was like this. I open the door, I invite them in, and I lose 1,000 life points. I would be dead by the time my 4th friend came over in Duel Links. I would be dead by the time my 8th friend came over in real game.
Corgian, whatever you do not let me in then.
I'm killing Corgian before this video is out.
Yeah, I have no main phase too. I'm already dead.
One of them is bleeding. Is he gonna be okay? Should we call the ambulance?
Judgment meter, that's not blood, that's just a tattoo.
Are they not good? They only have 1 star. Is that why they're hurt? Are they gonna get reframed, retrained?
So, here's one of my favorite things about flip effect monsters. They all require being flipped face up, which is usually through battle, which means the monster will almost always be destroyed. So, you summon his friends, and then they have to watch you kill the first guy.
Yeah! Do.
My fight money!
So in the end, you'll probably also be taking battle damage with no other benefits. When did this card come out? In the first few sets? Maybe an early GX set? No, this card came out in 2011, when flip effects were near obsolete and you could just play something like Photons if you wanted swarming.
There is a card that does what they do but better, except these guys can use for Xyz Summon, and that is the cutest flip effect monster, Scapegoat, which is just a card with a bunch of floating zombie scapegoats.
Well, if you expect them to be destroyed, it might as well be Giant Germ.
I'd rather play Giant Germ. Giant Germ at least damages your opponent.
But I guess if you resolve your D-Boys effect without getting the first set 1 destroyed, you get 2 more on the field and can finally summon Baby Tyragon or Galaxy Queen via Xyz Summon, so congratulations on that. If it's any consolation, these boys are a signature card of the fan-favorite character Scud in Duel Links. Everybody loves Scud.
Disclaimer, not everybody actually loves Scud. He's pretty creepy.
They actually gave Scud more personality in Duel Links than any other game. He's entirely about useless burn damage effects, so that just fits right in. And he's got a posse of D-Boys in Dark Side of Dimensions, which could also be the D in D-Boys. Any of those Ds could be the D.
Number 8, Noble Maneater Bug. On the surface, this is a pretty standard flip effect. You flip, you destroy too. Easy steps. But I feel the context of how Noble Maneater Bug came to be is kinda funny. He came out in Soul of the Duelist, which is when Konami upgraded a few early effect monsters. We saw the likes of Muka Muka, Hane Hane, and Maneater Bug get level 5 forms as Enraged Muka Muka, Hade Hane, and Noble Maneater Bug respectively, with the latter 2 being flip effect monsters in their original and upgraded forms. The original forms, Hane Hane and Maneater Bug, were some of our first experiences with card texts that had the dreaded : mandatory effect, so us kids were shocked in learning that if our opponent had a clear field and we wanted to flip these boys up, their effects would have to be applied to themselves or another monster on our side of the field, since that mandatory effect is getting resolved one way or another. Regardless, these were still staples for early Yu-Gi-Oh! Being useful effects for removal. Maneater Bug felt like the most memorable of the bunch, probably because it had a spooky anime appearance where its flip effect of destroying a monster was treated as dangerous, as real souls were on the line for each monster. They treated Maneater Bug's effect like it was inevitable, rather than telling Yugi, just run Nobleman across out or Royal Command in your deck.
He was also one of the first 5 effect monsters ever released, and only one of those 4 was not a flip effect, and it was Exodia.
Me.
My favorite thing about Maneater Bug is he has a face that goes... It's great. I love him.
My favorite thing about Maneater Bug is how the original version had one of the most redundant lines of text, which is, destroy one monster on the field, regardless of position.
Defensive regardless of position. Imagine you're on the playground and some kid's like, you can't kill it, it's in defense mode, it's defended. And we didn't know the rules, so they just wanted to make sure that before they started adding all these destruction effects, just let you know, put the rulebook in there.
Also, it was a dual spirit Bakura used against Pegasus's bodyguards, showing that this bug really did eat men. But back to Soul of the Duelist, where Maneater Bug's effect was outdated by that time, so the idea that it would be getting an upgrade seemed interesting. However, the upgrade ended up being a lackluster result of Konami's old philosophy about upgrading monsters, which was make everything bigger. They made it look buffer, increased its level from 2 to 5, and doubled its attack, defense, and monsters that it destroys with its effect.
What's scarier than one destroyed monster? 2!
My favorite thing about Noble Maneater Bug is they tried to double everything about Maneater Bug, except they have the number of eyes he has.
They put one of his eyes in the level thing, because he has 2.5 times the amount of levels.
You got me there.
Now you're clearly supposed to set this card, but with only 1200 defense, its only use is the flip effect. Its shell armor is made of paper mache with that stat line, so it's not surviving an attack.
He needs to stop skipping bicep and half day, or thigh day.
Furthermore, because there was no reliable way to set this monster via special summon when it was released, the only way you were really getting it on the field was setting it via tribute summon, which was an awful use of resources and possibly a telegraphed move if your opponent knew this card was in your deck.
I wonder what's gonna happen since you tributed to get a 5-star on... That's stupid. What a dumb dude.
Is my Labyrinth Wall Turbo deck a joke to you?
Yes.
Every time I tribute set, it is Noble Maneater Bug.
Yes, everyone does that.
Not to mention, if you somehow get in a scenario where your opponent has one monster on their side of the field that you need to destroy, and Noble Maneater Bug is your only out, it's worse than the original, since instead of destroying your opponent's monster when you flip it face up, it also would have to destroy itself in that scenario due to the mandatory effect. I find it funny how the implication with its name is when it destroys a monster using its effect, it's technically eating its opponent. So that means if it has to target itself for destruction, he's technically eating himself.
I think that he's a liar. He says, I am Maneater Bug. I'm a bug that eats men. But look at him. He is very skinny. He obviously has not eaten a man yet. Yet being the key word.
You don't know that.
I do.
But you don't.
Actually, I'm a Maneater Bugologist.
He can eat more than just man. He can eat robots, plants, rocks. Just look at the list of monsters that can be targeted and find the funniest thing that this bug can eat. Number 7, Needle Ball. Needle Ball is a standard early flip effect monster. The effect more feels like the novelty of it being an effect monster since they were more uncommon in the game at the time of its release. When flipped, you can pay 2,000 life points to inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. It's optional, so you can also just flip Needle Ball to let it die without purpose.
I love how his effect is worse than what it does. Like, you have to pay 2,000 life points.
So I think I have an explanation for that. As you're setting up this trap, you in fact have to hold the needle ball to place it. So they're stepping on it, but you are holding it the entire time you're setting this dude up. And he is just having a good time. He wants to watch the world burn.
What made Needle Ball weird is how mysterious it initially was to international audiences. It was released in one of the first Japanese sets in 1999 and reprinted in Japan Japan a few times after, but it never got an official international release, so international audiences just saw it as this video game exclusive card. Naturally, audiences were not clamoring for this subpar flip effect to be released worldwide, but Konami delivered it to us anyway 12 years after it was initially released. We saw it in 2011's Storm of Ragnarok packs. The delay on getting this card was so weird since it felt like it was out of nowhere. This happens from time to time where old cards that were released only in Japan get printed in a modern international set just as a treat, or because they technically would have meta relevance, like when Bolt Penguin was printed when modern Penguin support came out. But why Needle Ball at this point? Why did they choose the set themed around Norse mythology, samurai, and robot puppets? To note, Needle Ball was not the only old card previously exclusive to Japan released in this set. This set also saw the first time international releases of cards like Bloodsucker, which was a Japanese tournament pack exclusive in 2004, and the anime staple Cyber Shield, which was also another weird pick since this was a time when Harpies were not getting active support. Needle Ball would have snuck into this set a bit better if he didn't look so out of place. Even without the effect, you could tell this was not a modern Yu-Gi-Oh card in 2011. You can easily see this is classic early Yu-Gi-Oh art with that random pattern background and the more fantasy horror aesthetic. I'm not scared of him, but he looks like he would take pleasure in hurting me with his needles, and he'd have the voice of Frieza.
See this guy's face? This guy is friends with the Axe of Despair accent. Hey, yeah, oopla, oopla. Wanna go talk to Bite Shoes? Yeah.
It's just the Pointy Things Club.
I'm down for the Pointy Things Club. Love pointy things.
Number 6, Tindangles. Just all of Tindangles, the whole archetype. With flip monsters basically being extinct in the modern game, when Konami decides to print new ones, it's generally in an archetype centered around them, so monsters' flip effects are stronger to make up for their limitations, or they have support cards that let the monsters get set at unexpected times, or get flipped up and down early. Some end up being pretty good, or at least usable. You have strong ones like Sub-Terrors or Shaddolls, passable ones like Crawlers, and even our buddies the Penguins eventually got some support. But as we see with new archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh, they don't always turn out to be viable in the modern game. And that's where we get the flip effect monsters known as Tindangles, released during the Vrains era after some of the more useful flip archetypes. Okay, maybe I'm downplaying how useful they could be, but they were still slow in the end. They had pretty good graveyard setup by allowing you to discard them with one of their monsters' effects, and they even had a Soul Charge-esque effect with another card, but they didn't have much protection, and some of their higher level flip monsters had zero defense, which seems counterintuitive for a monster that has to be set first. Really though, we wanted to single out Tindangles because of their anime appearance and their user in the anime.
I love Tindangles so much. I love their origin. I love the guy who used them in the anime. I love how they appear in one duel, two duels actually, and then never again, and how just ridiculous conceptually they are, and how the entire archetype fell flat because Konami refused to support them because they were really cool. Their user in the anime, look at these cards. I posit to you people who have not seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. Who do you think the man who uses these cards looks like? Cards based off of the Hounds of Tindalos, using Eldritch lore.
Maybe like a mad scientist character?
I feel like this guy looks like Mr. Clean.
With a mustache. I'm gonna add that.
Okay, so we got Mr. Clean with a mustache. The answer is he's a mid-20s businessman.
Mr. Clean.
He has luxurious hair.
Mr. Clean. But before the accident.
Does he have a mustache?
No, he does not have a mustache.
So there's just a juxtaposition between how he looks and how his monsters look. At least he's playing what he likes.
But they're specifically designed to look super creepy and eldritch, and I love the aesthetic of them. And it pains me that they're flip monsters because flip effects are bad.
I think the fact that they managed to make it into the real life game based on a subpar anime appearance alone is weird enough to be on this list.
Oh, that's a cute Cerberus.
I love a cute Cerberus. It's so angular.
Number 5, Cobra Jar. The Jar archetype is a fun little series of cards. They're generally flip monsters with disruptive effects where you're discarding cards, drawing cards, putting cards back in the deck, all sorts of things that got some of them banned or limited at some points. Or or some of them are so weak or parodies of other jar cards that they're basically useless. Also, let's take a look at the part of their names that they have in common, jar. It's actually pot, or poto in Japanese. Jar was just used for international releases because some reason. I would speculate that it's because pot was already being used for Pot of Greed and the like, but then there's also Jar of Greed and its friends, so they were not trying to avoid confusion with the pot and jar spells and traps, especially since Pot of Greed is actually jar in Japanese, and Jar of Greed is actually bottle.
I like how ridiculous the jar effects were. They definitely have that, like, flip effect. There's something crazy under here. Like, they encapsulate that so well. Like a jar encapsulates things.
That's how jars work, baby. You gotta open up and find out what you get.
Regardless, with how synonymous the jars are to flip effects, we wanted to find the weirdest jar. Aroma Jar was the first to come to mind, since it was actually the first flip effect with only flip written next to its type and not with the flip colon in the description, but its effect is overall pretty basic. So if I had to pick just one, I'd say it's Cobra Jar, since it feels like the biggest outlier of the jars. It didn't even register in my mind that this was a jar card since it was so different from the other ones, but there's jar in its name and it's a flip effect, so there we go. Its effect is, you flip it, you summon a poisonous snake token, and that's it. Just one. Break this pot and the snake comes out. That's actually a pretty fun concept.
The weird thing is the tiny one is much stronger than the actual monster. Poisonous snake token has double the attack.
I will say, I love Cobra Jar. I think that everything about this is silly. His jar doesn't work right. Where is the bottom of the jar? It's... it's towards you. Where is the top of the jar? Also towards you. I like the two little eyes that are popping out of the jar. It's just his sneaky little friend.
Like, the flip effect says, there's a little dude in there. And then the art, there's a little dude in there. It just works so nicely together.
No, I don't like Cobra. Snakes, no.
But what about the little friend?
Yeah, I probably don't like that either. But you know what? I once had a snake, and it befriended the mouse that it was supposed to eat because snakes eat mice, and they were friends for a really long time in the snake's cage. So you know what? I think that's the mouse. I think they're friends. Maybe he's not so bad.
I wonder if the Cobra and the face in the jar of conversations before, he's got summoned. I think it'd be a pretty cool dude to have as a roommate.
You see, what's living in there is giant red sea snake, but because he's on land, his attack is lower, but his defense is higher, because he's dried out, so his flesh is tougher.
Ah yes, Duelist Kingdom rules.
Number 4, Parasite Parasite. Parasite Parasite is one of the most unique cards in all of card games. When it's flip summoned, it has to go into your opponent's deck face up, and when your opponent draws it, they suffer its negative effects on their side of the field, and with it being face up in their deck, both of you know when it's about to be drawn. It's meant to parallel how the card is a parasite infecting your opponent's deck. Then when your opponent draws it, it's immediately summoned on their side of the field, deals 1000 points of direct damage, and makes all their monsters insect type. And now that your opponent's monsters are insect type, you can prepare your anti-insect strategy that you waited anywhere from 1 to 40 turns to implement based on how deep in their deck the parasite was. I don't know, maybe you ran Dark Designator to get it out faster, or had an impeccable stall strategy.
By the way, search an insect from their deck. Jade Insect Whistle. It's made right for it.
It's a shame this card is unreliable and slow, since it's always been really cool in concept. The only times I've ever seen it successful are when Weevil snuck it into Joey's deck prior to their duel and had anime-only crap that activated it from Joey's deck as if he did the proper setup, and with Weevil's Duel Link skill, that adds a parasite to the opponent's deck prior to the start of the duel as if it had already been flipped up to mirror what happened in the anime. So whenever they wanted to show us the parasite, they always had to break the rules of activating its effect.
Did you know that 1 in 3 people is Parasite Parasite?
I'm not Parasite Parasite.
Well, I'm not Parasite Parasite.
Well, it's not me.
It's me!
A single moment of stupidity won't save you.
Fatality.
I like Parasite as a flip monster because he has the very funny thing of almost never properly triggering, because the way that flip monsters work is they get destroyed, bada bing, bada boom, they trigger, go to the graveyard, their effect resolves in the graveyard, but Parasite can't resolve in the graveyard, so unless you hit it with a monster with less than 300 attack, it's not going to do anything.
My Karibo beatdown strategy is ruined!
Besides being being slow, the Parasite could actually work against you after putting it in the opponent's deck with its effect. For example, if your opponent draws the Parasite and all their monster zones are full, it cannot summon itself automatically and just stays in your opponent's hand, so free card. If it does get to summon itself, it doesn't lock the opponent out of their normal summon, so they can still tribute it off or summon a different monster that also lets them use the Parasite as a material for a Synchro or Xyz or Link summon. And let's not forget my favorite interaction with the Parasite after it goes into the opponent's deck, where if a monster like Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest is triggered on their side of the field, they can actually search for the Parasite and add it to their hand, since it has less than 1500 for each stat and counts as being a part of their deck, which will also not activate its auto summon effect because they're adding it to their hand, not drawing it. Now your opponent could actually set the Parasite and flip summon it, thereby putting it in your own deck face up and turning the tides.
So, Parasite's text specifies he must be placed face up, right? This means Parasite is the only card that can be in the main deck that is face down under the effect of Convulsion of Nature. Which means, if you draw Parasite while Convulsion of Nature is active, because it's drawn face down, it won't trigger.
It's a normal card.
Despite all its shortcomings, at least it's pretty in real life, it was one of the first holos I ever pulled, so I tried using it back in the day, before I learned that it never works right. It's a bit more gruesome in the Japanese version, but it's shiny nonetheless. Number 3, Jigen Bakudan. Jigen Bakudan is a mess. It all starts with his name, which you would think is them not translating the name from Japanese like many other early cards whose names were the same in Japanese and internationally. And yes, the name was indeed translated, but not how you would think. It actually was translated from English to Japanese for the English version. In Japanese, its name was literally the English word time bomb written with Japanese characters, but when released internationally, I guess they thought time bomb sounded too basic, so they translated each word to Japanese, Jiken being time and Bakudan being bomb, wrote it with the Latin alphabet, changed the pronunciation a bit to unintentionally reference Lupin, and shipped it out. But what we liked the most about when he was summoned in the anime is the interaction between Pegasus and Yami Yugi went something like this.
I always use Jigen Bakudan when I summon Relinquished.
Not Jigen Bakudan, the infamous Time Bomb! Or, in translated fully to English, Time Bomb! The Time Bomb!
Translator's note, Keikaku means bomb.
I summon Dark Magician, the Dark Magician!
However, Jigen Bakudan's effect is also a problem, since it does a lot to be bad. It blows up alright, but only on your side of the field. When you flip it, you must tribute it during your next standby phase, then destroy all of your monsters to inflict half their total attack points as effect damage to your opponent.
It's a lot like Parasite, in which it will never trigger, because not only does it have to survive, in this case explicitly, all it is it just destroys your monsters for a little bit of burn damage. Jigen Bakudan is more than likely going to hurt you more than your opponent, because sure, you dealt the burn damage, where are your monsters?
You're not thinking the Galaxy Brain strategy. Step 1, you summon Prediction Princess Taratray, and use your effect to special summon Jigen Bakudan straight out of the deck. Step 2, flip summon Jigen Bakudan using Taratray's effect, triggering it. Then you play Creature Swap to give your opponent Jigen Bakudan. And then their turn rolls around, and you chain Rainbow Life to Jigen Bakudan's effect, so you destroy all of your opponent's monsters and gain life points equal to half their attack instead.
How many of those cards were searchable?
Everything but Rainbow Life.
Just draw them both together, yo.
Oh, true, I would have drawn them personally, yeah.
Yeah, just play like Zanzalug.
How big's a deck anyway? Like 20 cards?
Sure.
In the anime, it was just a normal effect that blew up the whole board in 2 turns, and each player takes damage equal to their own monster's attack values, like everything getting a Ring of Destruction. Couldn't they have just done something like that for its real-life effect? Well, of course not, since it was early Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's too strong, but don't make it as fragile as the flip effect makes it out to be. At least give it something that figuratively blows up in your opponent's face if they attack into it, like attacking a bomb should be. I don't know, make it like Mind Golem? Number 2, Bite Shoes. Bite Shoes used to have a confusing aspect to its text, but before we even get to the text, let's talk about its design. Who's it fooling? Is someone going to look at this shoe with an eye and teeth and say, maybe I'll just put my foot in it?
Oh, of course. I'd be double bite shoed up.
Alright, so how are your feet?
Gone.
Left foot offering. I like bite shoes quite a lot. Flip effect monsters are like, oh, don't touch that monster, there's something scary down there. And like, if attacking is kicking it, then oh, don't kick that shoe, you might put your foot in that shoe and that's uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, my foot. And then you change to defense mode.
It was a bit more tricky in Japanese, having a name that just translates to red shoes, so it was trying to hide the fact that it was a horrifying demon by claiming it was simply an inconspicuous red shoe.
I have a pair of those in my closet.
What's its end goal if it does trick someone? Can it actually bite off a foot, or does it just gnaw on them for a little? And where's the other bite shoe? The name is Bite Shoes, but there's clearly only one in the image.
No, this makes me angry like the star card you showed me. See, it's the same. It's red with teeth.
And one eye.
Yeah, and one eye.
Wanna know what else is red with teeth and one eye? Charmander. Do you hate Charmander?
No, he's adorable.
Charmander?
Also more of an orange color.
And 2 eyes.
Yes, thank you.
I like how it took that long for anyone to mention it. Like, we would just leave this assuming that Charmander had 1 eye.
I was planning to do that.
Now on to its effect. When it's flipped, you change the battle position of one monster, normal effect, but that's the updated text. Before they reworded the text, it used to say, change the attack or defense position of one face-up monster on the field. This card must remain face-up.
My favorite thing about Bite Shoes is the way its text is worded. Because the last line is, the card must remain face up, that monster can now no longer be put face down. You cannot Book of Moon.
Oh, so that's the ultimate strategy. So you put someone in face-up defense mode, and you get them ready to put on their bite shoes, switching them to attack mode, and then you beat down through the Element Saber Mole, who's unable to be flipped down by its nasty disruption effect.
Normally, I put the honorable mentions here, but similar to our retrain video, we were looking at the honorable mentions for this list and thought maybe we should just do a volume 2 someday instead of trying to rapid fire a bunch. I guess the weirdness of flip monsters cannot be contained in a single top 10 list, so let's just go to the top pick. For number 1, we went with a classic monster who's weird every way we broke it down and is something we feel we would only see in early Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is exactly what we want for this list. Number 1, the Castle of Dark Illusions. The different parts of the Castle of Dark Illusions effect make sense, it's just not the sum of its parts. When you break it down, you see that it has a flip effect, alright. It boosts zombies' attack and defense by 200, okay, standard early Yu-Gi-Oh! Effect. It gives an additional boost 200 per at the beginning of each turn. Nice, a continuous effect. And the continuous boost stops after 4 turns. Oh, all good things must come to an end, I suppose. So all those things combined into one effect just make it really slow. Like, just use an equip spell instead. Use the attribute boosters if you really want the power up on a monster. And why stop after only 4 standby phases? You know we don't need to analyze how minimal of a boost that is in the long run. 800 attack points, just get Malevolent Nuzzler instead.
The text on this card is just, it drives me insane because it says all zombie type monsters gain 200 attack and defense. On anything else, that would be a permanent constant effect. Not this time, because it's a flip effect. It only happens on the zombies that are currently on the field. And then during each of your next 4 standby phases, each of those zombie type monsters. So any new zombies don't get the boost. So you have to keep 2 counters in your head, which zombies get the boost and which zombies don't, for 4 turns, which you're keeping track of. And there's nothing in this Yu-Gi-Oh! Game to help you keep track of it. It's just they wanted you to do bad math.
Any other new zombies do not get this very meaningful and very quick attack boost.
Even beyond its flip effect, Castle of Dark Illusions was just weird. Look at its stats, 920 attack and 1930 defense. Why did they do that? Why is this a thing with mostly Panics monsters? It's not divisible by 50 and it hurts me as much as King of Yamimakai. Castle of Dark Illusions is also tied to Pumpkin, the King of Ghosts for some reason, where the Pumpkin gets gets an extra 100 attack and defense when the castle is on the field, and continues to get an extra 100 during the next 4 standby phases when the castle is boosting. So basically, a very standard minimal effect that is not worth the setup. Pumpkin is a level 6 monster with pretty mediocre stats for that level, so you'll need to tribute summon him, since hell if I know how to special summon him in 2002 without using Monster Reborn.
Pumpkin the King of Ghosts also has incredibly wonky, unheard of timing. If Castle of Dark Illusions is face up on the field, increase the attack and defense of this card by 100 points. It doesn't say once per turn, it's not an ignition effect, it's not a summon effect. It is a, as soon as Castle of Dark Illusions, a timer starts kind of effect. It is its own timing. And it's a separate timing from Castle of Dark Illusions. You want it to be even worse? If you do Pumpkin the King of Ghosts, flip up Castle of Dark Illusions, and then flip it down with Book of Moon and flip it back up, it forgets that it's this Castle of Dark Illusions and Pumpkin stops boosting.
Because it's technically a new summon.
It's the stupidest card! None of this is useful for your video, we just got too complicated, but it's such a stupid card!
I feel like they mixed up the effects here, since they made more sense in the anime. Pumpkin essentially had the castle's real-life effect, minus the flip, with his ectoplasmic fortification giant zombie power-up, where zombies got an exponential attack boost. So I feel like you could have just given him the castle's real-life effect minus the flip, and it would have been like the anime, but not as overpowered. And for the castle, well, its anime effect was cover your side of the field in darkness. So maybe when translating it over to the real-life card game, make it where your opponent cannot target your fiend monsters for attacks except the castle. I'm not sure how these two monsters even got intertwined outside of them being in back-to-back duels with unrelated users, but at least you can't break the castle's flotation ring in the real-life card game, unless that's what we want to do ever since they printed Attack the Moon. Regardless, with all these cards, stats, and effects tied to our favorite floating castle, we deem the Castle of Dark Illusions as the weirdest flip effect monster in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, what did you think? Who were your favorite monsters that we discussed, and who may have not been as weird as we made them out to be? And what flip monsters would you have added? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.